The courtroom is silent except for the faint hum of the air vents and the shuffle of papers. I sit in the corner, hands folded in my lap, watching my son explain to the judge why I'm no longer capable of managing my own life. He doesn't look at me. He doesn't have to. To him, I'm already gone, a signature, a liability, a loose thread in a carefully woven plan. But I'm right here. I feel the cold leather of the courtroom bench pressing into my back. I hear every word he says. My hands may be shaking, but my mind is clear. They found her confused behind the wheel, he says. It's not safe. We're just trying to protect her. Confused? I remember that day, one wrong turn, one panicked moment in traffic, and suddenly, it was a diagnosis. Suddenly, my name was off the bank account. My car was gone. My mail was redirected. And then I wasn't trusted with anything, not even the key to my own front door. But here's the part no one saw coming, not even him. Because the thing about stripping someone's power is this: you'd better make sure they stay quiet. He didn't. And I didn't. This story doesn't start with a fight. It starts with silence. With a woman everyone assumed would surrender. But ask yourself, how does a confused, fragile old woman end up outsmarting her own son and winning back everything they try to erase? You'll see. Just know this. By the time I was done, I wasn't the one losing control. He was. And this courtroom? It's not where my story ends. It's where his begins to fall apart. I wasn't always someone people could talk over. Back then, I had a name that meant something: Margaret Sutton. Church volunteer. Garden club president. Retired schoolteacher. The type of woman who still handwrote thank you notes and knew everyone's birthday by heart. I was 75, living alone since Harold passed. Not lonely, just alone. There's a difference. Every morning I'd drive to the bakery for my coffee and the crossword. Same seat, same order, same familiar nods from neighbors who knew me not as vulnerable, but as Miss Margaret, the woman who always had her lipstick on and her mind sharp. Then came my children. Ethan and Chloe. Chloe, my youngest, was always the sensitive one. She cried at commercials and apologized to furniture if she bumped into it. A single mom now, working too much, stretched too thin. We spoke often, but always in short, breathless calls. I knew she loved me, but she wasn't watching closely. Ethan, on the other hand. Ethan was always the fixer. The planner. The golden boy with the MBA and the perfect smile. He called me mom with a tone that felt more like a formality. He was polished, presentable, and distant. He didn't visit often, but when he did, it was always with a clipboard in hand, suggesting changes to my will, asking about long-term plans. He said he wanted to help me simplify. At first, I thought it was kindness. He started by managing my mail. It's just bills, Mom. Let me handle them. Then came my passwords. What if you forget? Then, he sat in on my doctor's appointments. Just to make sure they explain things clearly. Before I realized it, he was at every meeting. Every decision went through him. I thought, he's being a good son. But being cared for and being controlled can look a lot alike until it's too late. I saw it for the first time on a Tuesday. We were sitting in my kitchen, and I mentioned I wanted to go on a road trip. Nothing grand, just me, the coast, and my old car humming along the backroads like we used to do. He froze. His smile dropped. Then came the tone. The same one he used when I corrected his math as a child. Mom, that's not safe. You know you got lost last time. You were disoriented. I stared at him. Disoriented? I made one wrong turn in unfamiliar traffic. I asked for directions at a gas station. That was all. But he said it like a fact. Like it had already been decided. I laughed. Brushed it off. But that night, my car keys were missing. A week later, the doctor's office called to confirm my memory screening appointment. Ethan had booked it without telling me. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. But something inside me began to shift. I started paying closer attention. I listened not just to his words, but what he avoided saying. The quick glances. The patronizing nods. And then there was the way he looked at my house, not like a home, but like a portfolio. The rooms I'd decorated with my own hands. The porch Harold built. The fireplace where Chloe used to read bedtime stories. Suddenly, I could feel it all being inventoried. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. But sometimes, love and possession blur. Especially when the person taking from you believes it's for your own good. This wasn't just about concern. This was about control. The kind of control that smiles while it replaces your name with a diagnosis. The kind that looks you in the eye while quietly erasing your autonomy. I didn't know it then, but I was already disappearing from my own life. And no one, not even Chloe, could see it happening. Not yet. It didn't happen all at once. That's the trick most people miss. It wasn't some dramatic moment where I lost everything overnight. It was slower. Softer. Like someone dimming the lights one switch at a time until you're standing in the dark, not even sure when the sun went out. Ethan was careful like that. He knew exactly how to sound reasonable. Calm. Caring. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just offered. Let me take care of the bills, Mom. I'm already online all day, it's no trouble. At first, it was nice. Helpful, even. I didn't have to worry about due dates or late fees. One less thing to remember. He'd show up with a stack of mail, skim through it, highlight what he thought was important. Just saving you the headache, he'd say. I thanked him. Every time. Then came the banking. Look, if we just add me to the account, I can move money around if something urgent comes up. It's just practical. I hesitated. He noticed. Don't you trust me? He asked. That question. That weapon disguised as a comfort. Of course I trusted him. He was my son. My own flesh. But that was the first time I felt a knot in my stomach. The first time I smiled while something inside me pulled back. Still, I signed. One signature. That's all it took. Soon, there were more just-in-case decisions. My doctor appointments? He started scheduling them. Then attending them. Then speaking over me during them. She's been a little forgetful, he'd say. She's having some trouble keeping things straight. I'd sit there, in the room, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. I wasn't confused, I was overwhelmed. And now I was being spoken about like I wasn't even in the room. Then came the medication. He bought me a pill organizer. Told me he'd fill it weekly. At first, I was grateful. Then I noticed pills being added or taken away without explanation. I asked questions. He gave vague answers. You don't need to worry about that, Mom. It's all handled. That phrase. It's all handled. It's supposed to be reassuring. But when you hear it enough times, in that tone, it starts to feel like a closing door. The kind you didn't even realize was being locked. I started to lose things. Little things. First, my spare car key. Then my checkbook. Then the mail started arriving later, or not at all. When I asked Ethan about it, he shrugged. Oh, I just had it forwarded to my place. Easier for me to stay on top of everything. Everything. That's what he had now. Everything. And yet, it still didn't feel like theft. Not yet. It felt like fog. Like the details of my own life were slipping just beyond reach. There was one moment I remember so clearly. I was standing in my own kitchen, reaching for the coffee tin. It was on a high shelf, I'd always kept it there. Ethan walked in, saw me on my tiptoes, and rushed over. Mom, don't do that. You could fall. He grabbed the tin, set it down, and looked at me like I was glass. "You need to let me help more." And I remember thinking, when did I stop being able to reach my own coffee? It sounds so small. But that's how it starts. Not with a crash. With tiny rearrangements. Little by little, my world was being padded, protected, monitored, until it wasn't mine anymore. He got me to move in with him. Said it would be easier. No stairs, no maintenance, no worries. The guest suite was nice. Neutral. Clean. Impersonal. He said he wanted to take care of me. But care without consent is just control dressed up in better words. I wasn't making decisions, I was being managed. My calendar was filled before I saw it. My mail opened before I read it. My opinions second-guessed before I spoke them. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was slipping. Maybe I did need help. Maybe Ethan was right. That's the most dangerous part of this kind of betrayal, it makes you question your own reflection. You stop fighting not because you agree, but because you no longer believe you're allowed to. And the worst part? No one else saw it. Chloe was busy. Friends assumed Ethan was just being a good son. No one questioned anything because it all looked so reasonable. And me? I stayed quiet. Smiling. Nodding. Grateful, even. Because what's worse than being betrayed by someone you love? Being grateful for it. It wasn't long before help turned into handling. I wasn't being supported anymore, I was being steered. Ethan became the middleman between me and my own life. He answered my phone for me. He spoke to my bank without asking. He made decisions and presented them like favors. And when I hesitated, he leaned on that phrase again. I'm only doing this because I care. That's the thing about manipulative control, it wears the mask of love. It doesn't sound cruel. It sounds kind. Responsible. Reasonable. At least, at first. Then came the bigger changes. He brought over papers. Printed PDFs, clauses in fine print I didn't understand. It's just a precaution, he said. Estate planning. Asset protection. Legal housekeeping. I skimmed the words. They blurred. He pointed where to sign. And I signed. Because I was tired. Because I trusted him. Because no one ever teaches you how to protect yourself from your own child. A few weeks later, I found out he'd listed himself as my power of attorney. Full financial control. Complete legal access. He told me it was for emergencies only. That it wouldn't change anything day to day. But it changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't consulted. He'd take care of it. My medical records were rerouted. Appointments were booked and I was told after. One morning, I walked into the living room and heard him on the phone, speaking to someone about liquidating assets. He didn't see me standing there. Didn't stop talking. Didn't sound concerned. Just businesslike. My home. My money. My future. Reduced to a checklist. I wanted to scream. But I stayed silent. I still wanted to believe this was a mistake, a misunderstanding. That surely, if I just asked him directly. But when I did, he smiled. That same, polished, practiced smile. Mom, you're under a lot of stress. Let me take care of things. You don't need to be worrying about all this. Then came the memory test. I didn't ask for it. I didn't agree to it. He just told me the appointment had been made. Said it was routine. Just so we have documentation, in case anything ever happens. The questions were strange. What day is it? Who's the president? Draw a clock. I passed, mostly. But the woman evaluating me scribbled notes I wasn't allowed to see. Ethan later called it inconclusive. Then he called a lawyer. That's how I learned he'd filed for guardianship. In a matter of weeks, he'd convinced the court that I couldn't live alone. That I couldn't manage my finances. That I was vulnerable to being manipulated. And the irony nearly broke me. Because I was being manipulated. Just not by strangers. By him. By my own son. I tried to push back. I called Chloe. I tried to explain. But she sounded tired. Stretched thin. Not convinced. Ethan says you've been struggling, Mom. I don't know what to think anymore. And that's when it hit me. He'd gotten to her too. Not through cruelty. But through credibility. He made himself the expert. The calm one. The helper. And I was emotional. Stressed. Confused. It didn't matter that I knew what was happening. No one was listening. Because the moment someone labels you incapable, they stop hearing your no. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about power. It was about erasure. I wasn't being taken care of. I was being written out. Out of my finances. Out of my decisions. Out of my life. And if I didn't find a way to stop it soon, there wouldn't be anything left to come back to. After the paperwork was filed, it all happened faster than I thought possible. One morning, I woke up in Ethan's house, and by sunset, I was somewhere else entirely. He called it a rest stay. A few days in a care facility, just until the court finishes reviewing everything. No warning. No explanation. No choice. He packed my things while I was in the kitchen. Told me we were going to lunch. We drove in silence. The restaurant never came. Instead, we pulled into a beige building with a sign that said Silver Pines Transitional Living. A soft name for a hard place. Inside, the lights were too bright and the furniture too cheerful. I was met by a nurse with a clipboard and a fixed smile. Just sign here, Ms. Sutton. This is temporary. Temporary. Like my rights. I looked at Ethan. He avoided my eyes. His hand was already on the pen. That was the moment it hit me. He didn't see me as a mother anymore. He saw me as a case to be managed. I wasn't Margaret. I was the ward. A vulnerable adult in need of monitoring. They took my phone. Said I needed quiet. They took my purse. Said it was for safety. I had no contact with the outside world except for the staff and Ethan, who came by once a week to reassure them everything was under control. I wasn't allowed to leave the premises. If I asked questions, they noted agitation. If I cried, they flagged it as a symptom. Every word, every emotion, was twisted to fit the narrative they'd already written. I was being watched, but never heard. Even Chloe didn't visit. Later, I'd learned that Ethan told her I'd asked for space. Said I was tired. Confused. That being in the facility was my idea. The lies layered like wallpaper, clean on the outside, rotting underneath. They even scheduled another cognitive evaluation. This time, I knew what was coming. I tried to focus. I did everything I could to stay sharp. But the test wasn't built for truth. It was built to confirm what they already believed. When I pushed back, they called it resistance to care. When I refused medication I didn't recognize, they said I was non-compliant. Do you know how easy it is to lose your freedom once someone starts using the right language? You don't need handcuffs. You just need a few official forms, a concerned voice, and a diagnosis. They filed for full guardianship. The petition claimed I was mentally declining, socially withdrawn, and at risk of financial exploitation. The irony was breathtaking. Because the only person exploiting me was the one holding the pen. Ethan had built a fortress, legal, medical, emotional. And I was locked inside. I wasn't even allowed to attend the first court hearing. They said I might become overwhelmed. That it would be better for my well-being to stay put. So I sat in a plastic chair, in a pastel-colored lounge, while a judge debated whether I was fit to live my own life. I was invisible in the room where my fate was being decided. And that was the moment I stopped waiting for someone to come save me. Because no one was coming. Not Chloe. Not a lawyer. Not the nurses or the staff or the old friends who hadn't called in weeks. Ethan had convinced them all. So I did the only thing I could. I started paying attention. Watching. Listening. Collecting. Every word. Every shift in tone. Every contradiction. Because I may not have had a voice in that courtroom. But I still had eyes. And I still had my mind. And no matter what they wrote on their forms, no matter how many times they called me confused or fragile, they had no idea what I was preparing to do. I didn't expect to overhear it. But betrayal rarely asks for permission. It was early, maybe 6 a.m., and I couldn't sleep. The staff at Silver Pines thought they'd locked the office hallway, but the night shift had left the door cracked. I walked quietly, in my robe and slippers, like I used to when checking on my children while they slept. Then I heard his voice. Ethan. I froze. Pressed myself against the wall like a child sneaking candy. He was on the phone, relaxed, laughing. He wasn't talking about me. Not directly. He was talking about the house. My house. The one Harold and I built together brick by brick. I'll get a good price before winter. Already have an agent lined up. Once the guardianship finalizes, it's a done deal. A pause. Then a chuckle. She won't fight it. She can't. Those 4 words hit harder than anything he'd ever said to my face. She won't fight it. He was so sure. So absolutely convinced that the woman who raised him, who paid for his education, who took care of him through every fever, every heartbreak, was just going to fade quietly into paperwork. That's when I knew. This wasn't about my safety. This wasn't about love. This was a takeover. He wanted my legacy. And he wanted it before I could even be laid to rest. I turned and walked back to my room. Slowly. Calmly. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I sat down on the edge of that too-clean bed in that too-quiet room and stared out the window for a long, long time. Not because I was shocked, but because I finally saw it all clearly. The manipulation. The charm. The appointments. The forms. It was never concern. It was strategy. And now, he thought he'd won. He thought I had no one. No voice. No plan. He was wrong. Because what he didn't know, what he never saw coming, was that even when you take everything from someone, you still haven't taken their will. And mine had just come back sharper than ever. His mistake was thinking no one was watching. But someone was. Her name was Rosa. She wasn't a nurse or a lawyer or a doctor. She was just the night attendant, the one who made tea when I couldn't sleep and slipped me a chocolate from her purse when the days got too long. She saw things the others didn't. How I flinched when they said my name like it didn't belong to me. How I asked the same questions, not because I forgot the answers, but because I never got them in the first place. How I folded the edges of the court documents they left near my bed, reading them over and over, trying to understand what they were taking. She didn't say much. Not at first. But one evening, as she refilled the water jug, she looked at me and whispered, "You're not crazy." That sentence, so soft, so simple, landed like thunder. It was the first time in months someone treated me like I was still here. That night, she handed me a small notepad and a pen. "Write down everything," she said. "Dates. Names. Conversations. Even looks. If something feels off, put it in ink." So I did. Page by page, I started collecting it all. The missing mail. The unapproved medications. The contradictions in Ethan's stories. Even the call I overheard, the one about selling the house. I wasn't just a witness. I was building a record. And Rosa? She didn't stop there. She used her own phone, at risk to her job, to make a call on my behalf. To someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Mr. Llewellyn. A retired lawyer. A quiet man I once sat beside in grief counseling after Harold passed. I had helped him back then. Listened. Shared my story when no one else would. Now he was returning the favor. 2 days later, he walked through the doors of Silver Pines. Sharp suit. Steady cane. Fire in his eyes. He didn't ask permission. He asked for files. Then he asked for answers. And suddenly, things started shifting. For the first time, Ethan's voice on the phone didn't sound so confident. Because now, I wasn't alone. I had an ally. I had proof. And I had something Ethan thought he'd taken from me. A way back. The courtroom felt colder this time. But I wasn't the one trembling. It was Ethan. He stood just a few feet away from me, shifting on his heels, his polished confidence cracking at the edges. This wasn't the quiet little hearing he'd expected. This was a reckoning. Mr. Llewellyn stood beside me, calm and precise. He laid out every document Ethan never thought would see daylight. Bank transfers I hadn't authorized. Medical records altered without consent. A forged signature of mine on the guardianship petition. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The truth did all the shouting. Rosa's notes were included too, her first-hand account of what happened behind closed doors at Silver Pines. I watched the judge read through them. Slowly. Thoughtfully. And then, Chloe stood up. I hadn't expected her to come. I certainly hadn't expected her to speak. But there she was, trembling but determined. I didn't know, she said. I didn't want to believe he would, but I ignored the signs. I let him convince me she was slipping. That she was imagining things. She turned to me, eyes full of tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. And something in me, something frozen, finally began to thaw. The judge looked directly at me. Miss Sutton, do you feel capable of managing your own affairs? I stood. My knees shook slightly, but my voice didn't. I do. I always have. They just stopped listening. The courtroom was silent. Then came the gavel. Guardianship revoked. Power of attorney terminated. Control of my estate restored. Ethan didn't look at me as he left. But I watched him go. Not with anger. Not even with satisfaction. Just clarity. He had underestimated the one thing he never understood. I didn't need to fight loud. I just needed to fight smart. That night, I walked through the front door of my house. My house. And for the first time in months, I slept in my own bed. Not because someone allowed me to. But because I had taken my life back. Piece by piece. Word by word. With truth. With help. With sheer, quiet strength. They told me I was confused. That I couldn't drive, couldn't manage my money, couldn't make decisions. But here I am. Behind the wheel. Hands steady. Eyes sharp. Driving myself home. Not just to a house. But to my life. People think losing control happens with a crash. But for me, it was slow. It was polite. It sounded like concern. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Sometimes the ones who claim to protect us are the very ones taking our freedom piece by piece. Smiling the whole time. But I want you to hear this, clearly. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Being older doesn't mean being helpless. And being betrayed doesn't mean you're broken. I was never lost. Just silenced. And now, I speak not just for myself, but for every mother, every widow, every elder who was pushed aside and made to doubt her own mind. If someone is trying to convince you that you're no longer capable, ask yourself, who benefits from your silence? Because sometimes, the real confusion isn't yours. It's theirs. Confused by your strength, by your resilience, by your refusal to disappear quietly. So no, I didn't stop driving. I just changed lanes. And now, I'm not the one being driven. I'm the one taking the wheel. For good.